Okay, so we are going to talk about congruency and corresponding parts. So first of all, we've seen the congruency symbol before, and we've talked about it before. So congruency and corresponding parts. Remember the symbol for congruency is an equal sign with a little wave over it. Okay, so when we are talking about congruency or congruent, we are talking about same size and shape. So whether we have a figure and maybe we turn it this way, if they're congruent, then they're going to be congruent no matter which way you twist, turn them, flip, rotate, that kind of thing. Okay, so if we have specifically, let's say that this triangle, we'll label this as ABC, is congruent to triangle DEF. Okay, so if this is A, this is B, and this is C, and this is D, this is E, and this is F. Sometimes you'll have a diagram, sometimes you won't. Oopsie. Let's try that again. Okay, so sometimes you'll have a diagram, sometimes you won't. This right here, this is called a congruency statement. And that right there is enough to, let's see. That right there is enough to be able to identify all the corresponding congruent parts. So if I have, again, triangle ABC is congruent to triangle DEF. From there, since we're dealing with triangles, we have 3 angles and 3 sides. I know then that angle A is congruent to angle B. So I'm looking at the first letter and the first letter. I know also that angle B is congruent to angle E, and that angle C is congruent to angle F. So order does matter. Now, when I say order does matter, I could change this and have triangle BCA is congruent to triangle. I just have to be consistent. BCA, B would still have to be congruent to E. C is still congruent to F, and A is still congruent to D. So on a test or for any assignment, if you have this congruency statement instead of this first one, that's okay, because you are still giving me the same information. B is still congruent to E, C is still congruent to F, and A is still congruent to D. So I said that there were 6 corresponding parts, so the other 3 parts are the sides. So again, looking at the order that I have here, I could say that segment or side AB is congruent to, these are the first 2 letters, these are the first 2 letters. I could then say that BC is congruent to, see, these are the last 2 letters, and then finally, AC is congruent to DF. So first and last letter and the first and last letter. Okay, so these are called the congruent corresponding parts. Down the road, we will be referring to this as, ready for this, CPCTC. And this stands for corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. So if you have congruent triangles, or congruent any figure, you know that all the corresponding parts are also going to be congruent. So, let's try, and I'll keep in mind this does not have to be just for triangles. So if I have a figure, so be careful. So another way of showing the congruent parts is by using tick marks. So if I know that DE and M are congruent, I can use one tick mark. Let's say EF is congruent to PR, then that's another tick mark. GF is congruent to NP, that might be a third tick mark, and then these could have 4 tick marks. So even those tick marks will show congruency. The way that we show congruent angles, we've already done this before, but I can have one tick mark here, one tick mark there. Some teachers show it by putting in a different number of arcs instead of the little tick mark on the arc. It's the same thing, just be consistent. I prefer this because it's a lot less busy in the corner. So based off of this, I could say that quadrilateral DEFG is congruent to quadrilateral. Now you got to be careful that your tick marks are the same. So I don't know if this is maybe flipped or something. So I'm going to look at the tick marks. D has the same number of tick marks as M. E has 2 tick marks, so does R. F has 3, so does P. And then G has 4, and so does N. So sometimes you might see that these are flipped or rotated. And again, those are called corresponding parts. Okay, let's move on to I think I'm going to leave it like that, and then we are going to do another video for more examples.